When you want your spring break to feel like... and your kids' pool day to feel like... and your hotel bed to feel like... ooh, and room service to feel like... because at Hilton, hospitality feels like...
Your cabana's ready. Would you like fresh towels?
It matters where you stay. Book now at Hilton.com. Hilton, for the stay.
The world moves fast. Your workday, even faster. Pitching products, drafting reports, analyzing data. Microsoft 365 Copilot is your AI assistant for work. Built into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Microsoft 365 apps you use. Helping you quickly write, analyze, create, and summarize. So you can cut through clutter and clear a path to your best work. Learn more at Microsoft.com/M365 Copilot.
¿Hablas español?
Sprichst du Deutsch?
Kann du Norsk?
If you used Babbel, you would. Babbel's conversation-based techniques teaches you useful words and phrases to get you speaking quickly about the things you actually talk about in the real world, with lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts and voiced by real native speakers. Babbel is like having a private tutor in your pocket. Start speaking with Babbel today. Get up to 55% off your Babbel subscription right now at babbel.com/Spotify. Spelled BABBEL.com/Spotify. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Wonder-working power in the precious...
Incredible as they seem, are not the results of mass hysteria.
You may wish to adjust the dial you are currently tuned into.
The wrong station. The call woke him very late at night. It came from his second phone, and when he rolled over, his eyes were bleary, and the light from the machine a gray miasma. He recognized the voice. Who am I speaking to? A rough voice, an older man's, deepened by a heavy body. It's me, McPherson. Coles. Coles. Good. I'm sorry to wake you so late, but... I found a body just off base outside Nair. It's one of yours. That woke him up. One of mine. That's right. Sefton. Jesus. He sat forward in the dark. Memories rushed back. He'd known Sefton since they were in high school together. He'd been a problem even then. What happened? That's what I need you to find out. They're treating it as suspicious. Coles glanced at his clock. Just past 2 a.m. I'll be there before 5. Good man. It was a long, black drive north to Nair. Tried listening to the radio, but it kept sliding between local stations. The voices blended and hissed and laughed and sang until he flipped them off and drove in silence. His black Mercedes was perfectly clean inside. It still smelled new. That was the kind of man he was. His uniform was a dark blue sport coat with dark trousers and no tie. He'd have preferred a suit, but that stood out too much these days. Part of his job was to be forgettable. He chewed nicotine gum to stay awake as the Mercedes slithered winding roads past the black waters of Lake Simcoe and the Severn Sound. He didn't smoke, and he didn't drink coffee. When he arrived under the buzzing yellow lights of the police station in Nair, an MP and a local plod were waiting in the cold to bring him to the crime scene. It's bad, the MP told him en route. You know, we get our share of suicides on base. I've been first on the scene a couple times. But I've never seen something like this. That made Coles feel sick. They'd given him the outline of what to expect, It was so outre that he could barely imagine it. Tried to prepare himself. They drove out to a park whose ravine split the red brick Victorian mansions crumbling at the heart of Nair. A river wound black along the bottom, where black trees sheltered the trail from distant orange street lamps. You could find used needles in the dead leaves if you looked, but there were white lights down here now, glaring greenish through police tape around the crime scene. You ready? Of course he wasn't. Ready. The local plod lifted police tape and he ducked under. Then the scene was right before him, and some part of him shriveled at the sight of his old, not friend, definitely not friend, lying sprawled in the leaf mold. Sefton had been a big man, lean, powerfully built, with a black beard and square white teeth. He'd been quick and funny, but prone to sullen moods and mean, simmering grudges. He'd had a devil in him, which made him popular with the Americans, but he could code switch. Sefton was a family compact last name, and you could take him to the BNR or the Albany Club or the Tories LLC Christmas party and could count on him to speak the right blend of bland and charming words in a Canadian dainty accent. Now he was half buried in rotten leaves next to a dead deer, with the lower half of his face torn off and bloody skin curled up beneath his fingernails. His wild eyes stared in the variable light, and the naked teeth of his lower jaw grinned a few feet off from the rest of his head. The deer's neck had been broken. Its head faced the wrong way. Was the tableau staged? There were drag marks trailing the deer in the leaves and gravel. If it was staged, what was the message? If you squinted, it looked as if Sefton had been trying to eat the deer whole. Coles managed not to vomit. "What do we think this is?" "Our first thought," said the MP, "drugs, but you think he did this to himself?" The woman tilted her head. "A lot of addiction around here. On base, too. It's not—" Coles cut her off, gesturing sharply to the body with his full arm. "You're going to throw everything you have at this. You're going to treat it as a homicide. You're going to send me everything you have." He didn't wait for her answer. He ducked away beneath the police line, trying to keep his stomach down. It was homicide. That much was obvious, though he couldn't articulate why. Fortunately, his position meant he didn't have to explain anything to anyone but McPherson, who knew better than to micromanage. Maybe he was sure it was homicide for a simple reason, that he often wished he could kill Sefton himself. The sky was beginning to lighten as he drove out from town toward the base. His hands were clammy on the steering wheel. He kept the heat off, wanting the cold to keep him calm. Sefton had been dangerous. In fact, Sefton scared him more than any living being he'd ever met. Thank God he's on our side, that sort of thing. The thought that someone out there was capable of doing that to someone as dangerous as Sefton made him reach for a fresh pack of gum. The nicotine hit his bloodstream. Perversely, it slowed his tapping heart. Arriving at the gates, he was outwardly calm and handed over his ID. They let him through straight away, and he drove to the PMQs and parked out front of Sefton's house, taking a moment to gather himself. A young resource officer met him at the door. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Sefton isn't taking visitors right now." He showed the RO his badge. She quickly stepped aside. It was a modest, clean house. The woman, who waited under a wide, pale southern window in the living room, was pale blonde and small, exceedingly pretty. She looked up as he entered. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but other than that, he couldn't read her expression. "Maynard? Alessia?" She thumbed the corners of her eyes and gestured to a seat across the coffee table. Steam rose gently from the spout of a pale green teapot, clear and early light. He lowered himself into the chair across from her and nodded when she offered tea. Dapple green porcelain smoked as she poured, and he studied her face, as he always did when given half a chance. She had a 5-day-old bruise greening and mottling the left side of her face. "They won't let me see him." She passed Coles the cup. "You don't want to." "Respectfully, Maynard, how do you know what I want? Because nobody wants to see something like that. She sat back. It's that bad. She was reserved. He couldn't tell if there was satisfaction or horror or anything else in her voice. He wondered for a moment if she could have killed him, spiked his food, and then... No. Sefton's jaw had been ripped off in one clean movement, so violently that the front half of his throat came away with it. Lesia couldn't have done that. Not on her own, anyway. It's bad, he confirmed. How had he been recently? She gave a thin smile, tilted her head to show the bruise. He gave you that? She said nothing. He'd expected her to say nothing. A very strong code of silence bound operators and their families, even after death. Maybe especially then. Was he in any sort of trouble? Not that he would have told me about. Did he fall out with anybody recently? Argue with anybody? Suddenly, her reserve broke, and she let out a perfect little laugh, covering her mouth with fine-boned hands. What's the joke, Alessia? You didn't hear about it? About what? They put David Sung in the hospital 3 months ago. That was exactly the sort of thing he'd been hoping to hear. He stood. Wait, she told him. There's one more thing. She brought him to the top of the basement stairs. A sour smell emanated from below. You wanted to know about his mental state. She led him down. In the unfinished basement, harsh lights glared off a stainless steel table, the kind you found in restaurant kitchens. A 15-foot python lay folded up on the polished top, the head and tip of its tail sagging over the edge. The creature had been slit with a razor from cloaca to jaw. Alessia kept to the edge of the room, her green eyes seeking his from the gloaming. He just stared at the snake. The hell was he doing with that? Later. Coles didn't visit Sung himself. He wasn't stupid. Sung was an operator too, utterly dangerous. He radioed for the MPs to bring him in. Then he went back to the station and fell asleep in a gray boardroom. He dreamt of Sefton giving birth from his forehead, like Zeus, but instead of the goddess Athena, it was a thick and heavy snake that emerged. The dream was agonized, bloody, and gynecological. Then a sergeant woke him up and said they had David Sung in custody. He checked his watch. A few hours had passed. It was almost noon. He let the MPs interview Sung first, watching from behind the two-way glass. When they emerged, the MPs briefed him on what he'd already heard. The alibi seemed sound. He was in the city for a hockey game last night. Lots of witnesses. Says he stayed in a hotel, drove back up this morning. Does it add up? Well, he was on his way into town when they pulled him over. We're in the process of checking the rest right now. Thanks. He clapped the MP on the shoulder and went in. Surprisingly, Sung's face lit up. He was about average height, with the pared-down look of an endurance athlete. He'd been handsome when they were young, and now he looked much the same, only preserved. He had a trail of old scars coiled around his forearm like a snakeskin. Coles, good to see you, man. You got me locked up here. What's happening? Sefton's dead? They're trying to hang it on me? Coles sat across from him. Sung talked fast, moved fast, jumped from topic to topic. Coles tried to keep him slow. I can confirm that Richard Sefton was found dead at 1:28 this morning. Good. Coles raised his eyebrows. Sung formed his fingers into a gun. Fuck Richard Sefton. Coles kept his expression blank. That a confession, Dave? Fuck no. Sung threw up one hand and leaned back. But you had a falling out with him. He was a wreck, man. He was a piece of shit. He was totally off the rails. Tell me about that. Sung hissed out a breath. No comment. Coles leaned forward. Come on now. What? You worried about getting him in trouble? He's dead and you just told me he was a piece of shit. Tell me what happened. Sung shrugged. You know how it is. He mimed, locking his lips with a key. Coles flicked off the recorder on the table between them. He nodded at the MP in the corner to leave them alone and told him to turn off the intercom. He waited until the camera's red light flicked off above the door and its ophidian eye shut. Then he leaned forward again. "Alessia talked to me." Sung's face softened a little. "You know he was hitting her, right?" Coles nodded. "Was that what you went to talk with him about?" "Yeah. Well, Sung showed his teeth. He didn't like people poking around his marriage. He put you in the hospital. Wasn't that serious. Don't lie to me, Dave. I've seen the x-rays. Must have made you angry." No comment. "Did you kill him, Dave?" "No." There was something vulnerable about his expression. Coles believed him. He glanced down at his notes, then over to the trail of scars on Sung's forearm. "You been using again, Dave?" Sung looked away. No comment. "Was Sefton using?" "Not that I knew. Not using." That slight emphasis on using. Something clicked into place. Cole sat back. He was dealing. Sung said nothing. "Dealing what? Where'd he get it? Who was supplying?" Sung laughed. "Wrong question, man. What's the right one?" Sung folded his arms. "What, I have to tell you the facts of life?" "Give me the facts of life, Dave." "Shit, man. Well, you think it's a coincidence towns near bases always have such a bad drug problem?" Coles looked at him. "Whatever you're saying, Dave, I need you to just come out and say it. I'm not saying anything, let's be clear about that." But now the other pieces slithered into place. "You're saying Sefton does 12 years off the books in a country that grows most of the world's opium, and then brings his work back home. Do I have that right?" Sung shrugged. No comment. "So, who was his buyer? Is that the right question?" "Might be." No comment. "I need a name, Dave." Sung said nothing. Cole stood and left the room, grabbed a pencil off a nearby desk and a piece of paper from the recycling. "Anybody here a smoker?" One of the MPs raised a timid hand. "Let me borrow your lighter." Then he was back in the interview room, pressing paper, pencil, lighter into Sung's shackled hands. The lighter was green, plastic beginning to peel. "Come on, Dave. For old time's sake." When Sung didn't look at him, he said, "For Alessia, then. She deserves to know what happened." That struck home. Sung took the pencil and scribbled a name. He showed it to Coles, blocking line of sight to the two-way glass with one hand. Then he burned the piece of paper. Coles called one of his old contemptibles and asked him to meet for a beer after dinner in Vaughan. Then he drove 2 hours south to a chain pub called Diamondbacks. The draft tasted like it hadn't been cleaned since the Harper administration. DeFino was waiting for him in a booth in the corner. He looked odd to Cole's eyes in a faded green hoodie and running shoes and jeans. He looked like what he was now, an Italian dad. They ordered pints at the bar while the Leafs collapsed on 3 separate TVs. Then they retreated to the booth in its molting pleather, brown scales and pale skin beneath. DeFino got straight to brass tacks. "What's the up?" Coles looked at the flakes in his drink. Snakeskin. "I need to have a chat with someone who won't want to meet me. One night, all expenses paid. Call it $4.50 an hour per man. Team of 4. Grown-ups only. Should be 4 hours tops." DeFino studied him. His hair and goatee were still pitch black, trimmed close. He had new glasses, rectangular, dad glasses. They reflected the greenish glow of the TV. "Off book, I assume, since you drove 2 hours for a face-to-face?" Coles shrugged. "Call it a gray-op. Locals will know we're running something. Plausible deniability, but sanctioned from on high. Simple job, and if anything goes wrong, it's my ass only. You've been told it's above board." "Can I get that in writing?" Cole surprised him by reaching into his coat and handing over an envelope. DeFino opened it and scanned the signed letter. Jesus, I guess I can. I'm trusting you to be careful with that. DeFino folded up the envelope and tucked it away. Then he studied Coles for a long time. This is about Sefton, he declared finally. You've heard. Of course I have. This person you want to talk to, I'd be surprised if he did it. So you can promise me this won't be, He didn't say the word execution out loud. Cross my heart, said Coles. DeFino leaned back. I hated the guy. You know that? Whoever killed him did humanity a favor. I'll take the job because I want $2,000 and a night away from the kids. And because you've never screwed me. But I'm not doing this shit because of Sefton. And I won't kill for him again. The next night, Coles waited at the wheel of a rented car 3 minutes' drive from a low house on the edge of a swamp outside of Torrance. It was almost 4 a.m., but he was sharp. There was so much nicotine flowing through him that he could have sworn his blood was black as the lake beyond those pines. Just when he was beginning to worry, he got the ping on his second phone. £, that's all, sent via signal. It was his cue. He put the car in gear and drove silently down back roads, headlights bleeding over the still trees. The sagging bungalow belonged to a man named Gagnon. A beater car and $30,000 motorbike waited in the low gloom of the carport. He felt someone's eyes on him in the darkness. Control, he said, identifying himself. And a moment later, DeFino's voice answered from the darkness of the front door. Team. He felt himself relax, climbed up rotten steps to find the door empty, open. In the dark of the living room within, he found Gagnon lying on his front with a gag in his mouth and zip ties locking up his ankles and wrists. DeFino and another masked operator stood over him like black statues. Coles nodded, and DeFino crouched to remove Gagnon's gag. Gagnon didn't shout. Coles assumed he'd been briefed on what would happen if he did. Instead, the man stared up at Coles, eyes white in the moonlight that filtered through the front window's grime. He had a tattoo of a cobra on his neck. You're making a mistake, he whispered. You don't want to fuck with the people I work for. DeFino's second operator kicked him in the ribs. Yeah, we saw your colors, DeFino told him. He meant the chipped leather vest with its death's head and SS patches on a hook by the door. We got a little club of our own, though. Coles crouched in front of him. Mr. Gagnon, we're here about Richard Sefton. Gagnon's eyes widened. Jesus, I just buy from the guy sometimes. I don't know what he did to you, but Sefton's dead, Mr. Gagnon. Gagnon went completely still. I didn't know that. You could see the pulse throb in his throat. That's who you people are. Look, I had nothing to do with it. I needed him. He was making me rich, and I wouldn't have fucked with the guy in a million. Coles interrupted him. Do you have any rivals we should know about? Any problems? No, not that I know of. Coles leaned close. I want to tell you something, Mr. Gagnon. These men here went to war with Sefton. If they think you had something to do with his death, they'll torture and kill you. And I won't be able to stop them. We're not here legally, so please, give me something. Something that will convince them to spare your life. Gagnon's face was white in the dark. He licked dry lips. The restaurant, he said. It must have something to do with the restaurant. After he told them what they needed to know, they left him tied there on his floor. One last thing, said Coles on his way out. We found a 24-foot python on a table in his basement. Looked like he'd been dissecting it while I was still alive. Can you give me any insights into that? Jesus Christ, said Gagnon. I don't know. I got no earthly idea. The restaurant wasn't hard to find. Not so many Afghan restaurants and strip malls in the outskirts of Barrie. Sefton had often met Gagnon by night in the parking lot out back. Gagnon thought the place was chosen at random, until one night when Sefton had emerged in his snakeskin jacket from the kitchen door. It was afternoon when Coles pulled up out front, deep and gray, and Coles exhausted from the night before. Instead of sleeping, he'd pored through immigration documents, searching for connections. Maybe he'd found one. The restaurant's name was Carzara, and its faded sign was hand-painted, pink oleanders on a teal sky. Coles went in alone. Beyond the doors and their faded curtain, it was warm inside Carzara, and the smell was onions cooked in olive oil, cumin and lamb and saffron and herbs. The walls were faded, color of mint, and cluttered with old photographs of Kabul in the 60s, the women with their hair coiffed in Western style, pictures of the Argandab River in springtime, of the Bamiyan Valley green below the roof of the world. Among the many photos hung a small plaque, hand-painted in the same calligraphy as the restaurant's name. Which of your Lord's favors will you deny? Beneath it, the attribution, 5547. Coles sat himself beneath the Buddhas of Bamiyan. An older man in a white shirt came to him smiling, with a glass of ice water and a plastic-covered menu. Coles recognized him from his documents and smiled back a little flatly before scanning the menu. Have you eaten at an Afghan restaurant before? That curious blend of vowels, an international school accent. Yes, Coles told him. I'll have the ashrak, please. Excellent choice, sir. When the dumplings arrived in their rich sauce, sprinkled with fresh mint, Coles smiled flatly again. Well, they look wonderful. Specialty of the house, sir. The server turned to go, but Coles asked him, Would you join me for a moment, Professor Hafez? The man froze. He looked back at Coles with a bloodless face. Then he did as he was bidden, sliding at the chair and sitting meekly with his hands in his lap. You are CSIS, he said. RCMP. Coles showed him identification. What do you want with me, Mr. Coles? I want to know about your dealings with this man. He showed Hafez a photo. Even the image of Sefton made him flinch. It is not safe for me to talk to you about him. Don't worry. He's dead. Coles watched closely for his reaction to the news. It blew through the old man's body like a wind. The professor sat back. Dead? How? We're treating it as a homicide. Is my family in danger? Coles tilted his head. I won't know until you tell me about your dealings. Hafez put his elbows on the table and covered his eyes with the palms of his hands. I just want to be left alone, Mr. Coles. I just want to pay my rent and put aside some money to help my niece and nephew get their education. Then talk to me. Hafez looked up. I should not speak to you without a lawyer. But you will, said Coles, because when I show you the picture of what happened to Sefton, you'll understand how badly you need my protection. Hafez shut his eyes and turned his head away sharply. I do not wish to look. Then talk. Hafez let out a breath. I was coerced, Mr. Coles. Sefton was a dangerous man. He could use the law to hurt me and my family, to say nothing of what he could do outside the law. I was petrified. How did you know him? I was a collaborator, Mr. Coles. I thought the West would bring my country into the 21st century. To my chagrin, it did. Coles let that statement slide off the glass of his mind. What was he coercing you to do? Well, among other things, Sefton had smuggled antiquities out of Afghanistan. He needed identification, provenance, approximate value, and introductions. You were able to provide these things. Hafez almost said something sharp, and then caught himself. It is expensive to come to this country, Mr. Coles. I have been lucky. Many more deserving people have been less lucky than I. Who'd you introduce him to? Nobody who could have killed him, Mr. Coles. An antiquities broker who a desperate friend put me in contact with. I need a name. Ryan Fisher. He's with Pelham's. Pelham's? Hafez gave him a humorless smile. So surprised? It's a reputable firm. Yes, that's how you know the looted treasures are genuine. Coles pushed on. How much volume was he moving through Fisher? Well, in terms of value, perhaps $250,000 since he began coercing me. And what was your fee? Hafez laughed. $100 cash upon completion of each sale, and protection from his poor opinion. Coles leaned back and crossed his arms. The food was getting cold in front of him. You're describing motive to me, Professor Hafez. No. Hafez glanced to the green sinuousness of the Argandab River. Much as I would have loved to hurt Richard Sefton, that was beyond my power, Mr. Coles. The strong do what they can, as your philosophical tradition tells us. And the weak must suffer what they must. Fisher's office was clean green glass overlooking Bay Street, and Fisher himself was a handsome, blue-eyed man in his early 30s, with sandy hair that curled down to his shoulders. He watched the traffic below while Coles sat in a snakeskin chair, scrolling through Fisher's listings on a rose-gold tablet. Behind polarized glass, a breathtaking frieze of the Mayan god Kukulkan adorned the wall beyond him. Who had taken it from what temple, or how, or when, remained unexplained. Despite the rose-gold finish, Fisher's tablet screen was as greasy with fingerprints as any Coles had ever touched. Antiquities rolled past his fingertips, Roman cage cups of dichroic glass, votive figures of blue Egyptian faience, Etruscan bronzes. He stopped scrolling. Bactrian princess statuette, the description read, early Oxus civilization, circa 2250 BCE, chlorite and alabaster, northern Afghanistan. The price wasn't listed, if you had to ask. He glanced up. You were aware, of course, said Coles, that Sefton was selling you cultural artifacts he'd stolen during his time in Afghanistan. Fisher didn't even flinch. He half turned and flashed Coles a smile. You know, people make accusations like that all the time, he said, but until they're proved in court. That's all they are. Coles went back to scrolling. Mr. Fisher, the people making those accusations aren't usually people like me. He stopped suddenly. What's this? Fisher came over with his hands in his pockets and looked down at the screen. Ah, yes. Lot 76, he said, smiling. The Snake Man. Unknown origin, presumed Helmand culture, Afghanistan, circa 5th millennium BCE. Think of that, 37 centuries before the conquests of Alexander the Great. He reached out to touch the figure on the screen. He was a snake man himself, come to think of it, conceived when Zeus ravished his mother in the form of a serpent. Makes you wonder, doesn't it, if the artist knew, if this statue prophesied the world-changing violence to come. Coles glanced up at him. Fisher was lost in that image on the screen. You're one hell of a salesman, Mr. Fisher. The art dealer's reverie broke, and he smiled again, clapping Coles on the shoulder. Ryan, please. Mr. Fisher, Coles told him. I need to view this item. I'm afraid that's impossible. Why? Our system hasn't updated yet, but that lot has recently been sold. To whom? Fisher smiled. Get a warrant. It was the end of a long day. A long couple of days. Leafless oaks rattled in the wind as he slouched up the brick front steps of a Rosedale home. By the time he reached the door, it was already open, and McPherson was waiting for him, unscrewing a bottle of red. How's the case? He wasn't a tall man, but he was wide, and his hands like spades, a torrent of red curls grayed at the back of his bald pate. Held up for now. I'm waiting on a warrant. Against whom? Pelham's. Pelham's? McPherson laughed. They're a reputable firm. So I'm led to understand. Floor-to-ceiling windows admitted gray light into the wide, dark kitchen from a walled backyard. The countertop and backsplash were all green marble. Serpentine, Coles thought it was called. "Have a seat," McPherson told him. "Join me for a glass." The Amarone poured thick and dark as nicotinized blood. The glass was peerless crystal. Coles drank in silence, watching wind rage in the dead trees outside. It was strangely silent in the house. No music playing or radio. There was a painting above the fireplace which Coles hadn't seen before. A Temptation of Eve, heavy scales green against the soft skin, grinding along the warmth between her legs. On the far side of the kitchen island, McPherson trimmed and peeled shallots, slicing finely through the soft pink bulbs. "I've got something in the oven," McPherson explained. "I hope you don't mind if I cook. Walk me through what you've got." "What I've got..." He had Sefton lying dead with a mutilated deer and his jaw ripped off. He had green bruises on Alessia's arms and train tracks on David Sung's. He had a clear memory of Sefton kicking a kid bloody under the bleachers, and a copy of Plutarch's Life of Alexander dog-eared to the page where a snake impregnates his mother. He had unknown origins, presumed Helmand culture, and a professor who'd seen members of his family put against the wall and shot by coalition forces. He had a suspicion that McPherson bought his art through Pelham's. "Well, it's nothing good," he said. He'd undergone some kind of psychotic break. McPherson's knife gleamed. Undone, the shallots bloomed like oleanders. "Post-traumatic? Seems likely. He was eating bushmeat and beating his wife. He was also dealing heroin." "Poor man." McPherson didn't look up from his cutting board. "Was he using as well?" "Occasional, according to the tox report. Oral, not injection. Not serious enough to explain what happened to him." "Who was his supplier?" Coles laughed. "The Northern Alliance? Hamid Karzai's brother-in-law? Someone over there, anyway. He had a storage unit full of suitcases. No customs on the secret flights, I guess." McPherson cracked eggs into a glass bowl. Green olive oil, bright champagne vinegar. "Who was buying?" "He was wholesaling to a motorcycle club. In Copperheads. A man named Gagnon." McPherson whisked eggs into a smooth emulsion. "Lead suspects, then?" Coles shook his head. "I don't buy it. The killing's too strange. If he was gunned down somewhere, that'd be one thing. But to stage it like that without leaving any evidence, I don't see Gagnon pulling it off." "Or their operator, then? Sung?" "No." Coles was even more sure. Sung was afraid of him. He wouldn't have taken any risks. He'd have dropped Sefton with a rifle from 300 yards. McPherson went to the fridge. He produced a bunch of tarragon and a jar of capers. He mixed vinegar and grainy mustard. "You don't seem surprised by any of this," said Coles. "Any what?" "Any of it." McPherson shrugged. "Sefton was one of yours. Are you?" He began to slowly fold ingredients together, streaks of green coiling to the fat of the remoulade. The sound made Coles feel faintly sick. He looked down. He asked the question in the back of his mind. "Did we know?" "Know what?" "About Sefton. Any of it. All of it." McPherson put the bowl aside. "White wine, I think." He turned to the fridge. "Something with a bit of dirt. Chenin." He snaked a cold bottle from the door, 2 fresh glasses from an alcove. "Sefton was an asset," he declared, turning back and nudging the fridge door shut. "Let's think of him as one. When you buy investment property, say, you throw up a coat of paint and flip on it as quick as possible. You don't look behind the walls." Coles said nothing. "You'll stay for dinner, of course." "Is this a widespread problem?" Coles asked. "No," McPherson told him. A timer went off, and McPherson filled his hands with dish towels and bent to the oven. Coles turned slowly and drifted to the already set table by the window. He looked out at the cold wind hanging in the dead oaks of the garden. There were small shelves just to his left, framing the double-glazed glass. The shelves were full of little trinkets, statuettes. He picked up the slender votive figure of a goddess and admired her. Chlorite alabaster, yes? She looked just like Alessia, with her soft green bruises. He wondered what corner of the world she'd been taken from, and who had taken her from there. McPherson put a heavy platter down on trivets on the table behind him. When Coles turned to look, he found the tray bulging with the first 3 coiled feet of a dead python. The heat had baked its scales gold. The heat had burst and clouded its eyes like those of a fish. "Will you eat with me?" McPherson said. "I somehow feel it's something we should share." And after a moment, Coles did what was easiest given the situation. He sat down across from his superior and accepted a plate, and spooned fresh remoulade across the steaming flesh. To his surprise, it was quite good. The pairing of wine was excellent as well. The Wrong Station is made possible with the generous support of our listeners on Patreon. Join us today at patreon.com/thewrongstation for bonus episodes, behind-the-scenes content, ad-free listening, and additional goodies celebrating our decade of dread. This week's episode, That Eateth His Own Tail, was written by Alexander Saxton and performed by Anthony Botelho. Thank you to Victoria L., Ink Sprite, Emily Murray, Lessa A. Hartwig-Williams, Allison, Susan L., Nevin Mergen, and a very special thanks to Watt DeFino and Ryan Fisher for helping us keep the lights, well, off. The Wrong Station is co-produced by Alexander Saxton, Anthony Botelho, and Jacob Duarte Spiel, with music composed and performed by Alon Citrin, and arranged for the viola and performed by Viola Schmidt. You can follow us on social media at The Wrong Station, or email us at thewrongstation@gmail.com. And until next time, thank you for listening.